Hair and makeup time.
Pop, what's going on, man?
Son, how you doing?
Doing good. Gotta get slick before the camera comes on, or
I
while
know, a
the
little
camera's
hair and
on.
makeup activity going on
In
in
this
the
case, well, so
in
it's
the
like
Hollywood scene.
you hit that record button, and then you look up at yourself, and you realize the hair's not exactly where you want it to be. Now there's no going back, so you gotta clean up a little bit. You know how it goes, Pop. But
I know how important your appearance is to you for these podcasts.
incredibly important, as you can tell. So
Bright and early on a Sunday morning.
Bright and
on the
early
West
Sunday
Coast.
morning, probably literally the only hour I have open in this weekend to squeeze this pod in, and we are here, folks. So don't ever question the boys' dedication when it comes to the Dom and Pop podcast. We are making it happen come hell or high water around here. Pop, how you been, man? How's everything?
Doing well. Ready to get down, break down, get down. Ready to get down and break down week one of free agency. It was a lot of activity, a lot going on. So it'll be cool to kind of get our takes going on that.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff to get into. We had a crazy week. It was the splashes for the Commanders were pretty much done after the first day, but boy, were there some splashes. So we already talked mostly about that in detail, but we're going to do more of a kind of overview in this segment. In the next segment, we're going to do a roster breakdown, kind of going over all the guys individually that have re-signed and been brought back. But so 26 signings in total. I think we had 29 guys that were up for free agency. So that math is just starting to math. Just about 2 trades, 7 new free agents, 17 players in total re-signed. So where are your vibes at, Pop, on these free agent signings, on the trades? Overall, how you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always get super hyped going into free agency. And then when you actually kind of hear the free agent signings, there are a lot of guys that I'll admit, not all that familiar with in terms of, names and the type of players that they are. Of course,
Sure.
The Laramie Tunsels and the Debo Samuels of the world, of course. Those are potential superstars that we're bringing in.
Blue chip guys.
Super excited about those. Love those moves. But yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the roster overall, the big question that you ask, I mean, getting to the headlines is, did we get better? Right. And I think we filled up a bunch of roster spots. Like you said, 26 out of 28 or 29, whatever the openings were. So you like that. Brought a lot of our own guys back, which I'm actually happy about because I feel like the core of this team, it's a championship. They made a championship run to NFC Championship, so why not bring a lot of these guys, and we'll break down the details there. Lost a few guys, which we'll talk about as well. But I think if you look at the additions and subtractions, and you also look at the idea of Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and his assistants wanting to bring guys in that fit the mold, that fit certain characteristics that they're looking for. I think John Allen is a great player. Arguably, that we might have lost a little there if you compare John Allen to Javon Kinlaw straight up, right? But Javon Kinlaw brings a skill set, brings an ability that's different than a Johnny Newton or Deron Payne or John Allen. And I think that's the idea, right? Is to get more people that fill a certain skill set or a certain ability that they were looking for. So overall, it's interesting. I mean, I'll leave it with this, a lot of 1-year deals, both with the guys we brought back and the guys we signed. So that's an interesting situation that's happening that feels a bit different in terms of how AP's building this thing. And maybe it falls into his idea of building through the draft, but we've got a lot of picks away. So an AP we trust, we'll just keep that rolling.
Definitely. And I think it's important to put into context the market too, right? And where free agency is in the NFL at this point in time. Free agency is kind of the B market in the NFL right now in terms of talent. Now, some A players do get to free agency, but when you talk about guys like Micah Parsons, when you talk about guys like Jamar Chase, when you talk about these generational stud players, Myles Garrett, they don't get to free agency. They just don't. You draft them, You
Yeah.
go, oh my gosh, we got one of these guys, and then you bend the next 15 years of your franchise around making sure that these guys stay happy, healthy, and in your locker room. So you pay them whatever you want to pay them. You saw it with the Myles Garrett thing. You got a guy that you could make an argument it would be better for Cleveland to let them go. But at a certain
Yeah.
point, you got to have a reason for people to want to watch your football team. So you bring the guy back, you pay him $40 million a year, and you figure out the rest around it, right? So when you're talking about these names like a Josh Sweat or like a Milton Williams, etc., these are guys that are B plus players, A minus players. These are not A plus blue chip players. These are B plus guys that you have to pay like A plus guys if you want to bring them in. So you saw that happen with Carolina. You saw that happen with Arizona. They pay a premium for these players that are not necessarily premium cost players, but that's how the market goes. Because the guys, the Justin Jeffersons of the world, dictate the market. And then when Chris Godwin hits the open market, you got to pay him a little more than Justin Jefferson got paid because he got paid a few years ago. That's kind of how it goes. So, AP, you heard some reports about certain guys like Joey Bosa, and DeMarcus Lawrence, I think, was one of those names. But you heard reports about certain guys that AP had interest in, put a number down on the table, and other teams were willing to pay more. And he said, "Okay." He said, That's not the value. That's not what we are willing to pay here." So I think that's a good sign. I like that. And I think that when you look at the guys that they brought in, there's a very clear focus defensively on addressing the run defense. It's flashy to get to the passer. Getting to the passer is obviously extremely important in the NFL. But these guys that they're bringing in, these are run defenders primarily. Kinlaw is more of a pass rusher, but aside from that, you know, your Dietrich Wises, your Eddie Goldmans of the world, these are run defenders, and these are guys that
Right.
they're bringing in to shore up against the run, to have packages ready against the run. So I think that's an interesting kind of change. And like you said, I think in just about every position group we got better, except for you can make an argument at defensive tackle, whether or not you like John Allen or Kinlaw. Bottom line is Allen played bad until he got hurt, came back, played okay. But they've seen enough of John Allen. They've seen a ton of Javon Kinlaw. And they said Kinlaw fits what we want to do. It's their guy. So
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Well, and I think it's interesting, right? When you look at the numbers, right, that break down on the 26 players that we've, I guess you'd say, acquire or signed, or we've
Yeah.
kind of secured up to fill out the roster, right? So two big splash trades, right? And you think about Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil, right? I mean, did any teams acquire bigger names than those two guys? Like, in terms
Probably
of the
not.
transactions that have occurred over the last few weeks. So two of the biggest splashes that have occurred in the off season have come, in Washington and adding, like you said, potentially blue chip starter players. You bring back 17 of your own guys, a lot of them on 1-year deals, right? A couple of exceptions. John Bates got 3 years. I can't remember if there was anyone else that got
No,
more than
I
a
don't think
year.
so.
But you bring back a lot of your core guys, right? And then seven free agents. So we're not seeing the turnover. And I called this, by the way. A lot of people were saying, a lot of reporters, very respectable reporters, saying we were going to see the same level of roster turnover this year that we saw last year. And it's nowhere near close. We
Yeah.
brought back a lot of our own guys that we thought were contributors. And again, stay tuned because we're going to get into that. We're going to go position group by position group, talk about who we kept, who we let go, all of those things. So, when you look at it from that point of view, a lot of it makes sense. And you're right. Great players for the most part are not available in free agency. Good players are guys that, again, fit a role, fit a need. And, I'm not going to get overly excited or overly disappointed, except for maybe the big splash guys, because we won't know.
Yeah.
I look at a guy like Javon Kinlaw, right? And I think about what we did with our line last year, right? And how Dante Fowler, we got a lot more out of him than anyone else in his career got out of him, right?
Yep.
So we had sort of this defensive line by committee. Throw a bunch of really good players out there, guys with potential, and let's see who rises to the top. What's the cream that comes to the top? And I think that's what we're seeing. I think again this time, except I believe it's more targeted in terms of the type of player that they want to bring in.
Yeah, exactly. And they know better what the guys in the building, it's one thing to go through training camp. It's one thing to watch tape and to mentally apply, okay, John Allen's being asked to do this in Jack Del Rio's defense, and he's capable of doing this. So I think in my defense, if I'm asking him to do something else, he'd be this level of capable. It's one thing to do that, and then it's another thing to play, you know, 20 games. We played 20 games last year, plus preseason, plus training camp, plus OTAs. It's another thing to play 20 games of NFL football, win 14 of those, and go, okay, now what? What's available. So I think that's where things get interesting. I think my math is a little screwed up there on terms of the number of games, but no, 14-6. That's correct. That's actually exactly correct. So I nailed the math. Early morning pod for the boys here. We're pulling through. But do you have any favorites, Pop, out of the free agency guys? I mean, I think if you asked either of us our favorite acquisition overall, we'd say Laramie Tunsil, right?
Yeah.
But do you have a favorite non-trade acquisition of the guys?
I think I'm going to go with Will Harris. I think that Will Harris. I love his versatility. I love the skill set that he brings in terms of being a coverage guy. I love the fact that he can still lay the wood when he has to. I was excited to hear about him in the interview. I think he's going to slide into that starting strong safety slot and fit in really well with the rest of the guys that we've got there. I like Will Harris. I'll give him the nod as my favorite. And it's just a gut feel.
My guy is Nate Herbig from the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh, Nate.
Backup interior offensive lineman they got. It's a depth piece. He's coming off of an injury. He was solid in Pittsburgh. Big body. Just the type of guy just the type of guy that you get into. And all due respect to Trent Scott, who I think did the best that he could with the talent he has when his number was called. But you just get into these conversations where you go, somebody's going to twist an ankle. And when that happens, we don't want Trent Scott being our starting right guard in the Super Bowl. We don't want Trent Scott being our starting right tackle in the Super Bowl. How do we build that depth? And that's where bringing in a guy like Nasty Nate, maybe not the sexiest of signings, but that's where you're getting better in spots that are a little bit invisible, and you need to build that depth on the interior offensive line. So that's my favorite signing of the group. But I'd say that's just about it in terms of our boys here, Pop. Do we get into the roster breakdown, or I think there's one more thing we got to talk about?
I think I got a question for you first.
Let me get some water here.
I know that you were pretty fired up about this particular issue, right? So, I mean, I would say in terms of grades, a lot of people like PFF grades. 8- is what they gave our free agency class for what that's worth. Generally, I'm seeing some pretty positive feelings out there. I don't know whether I feel like the trades, even though maybe they're not supposed to be part of it, or part of what's bringing that grade up, but you got to love it. I mean, even Yahoo Sports gave an A-. So seems like the experts out there like it. But the one criticism that we're hearing is that the age of a lot of the players that we both re-signed and we brought in, how much older, and the fact that we've given away draft picks, so it may stunt our ability to get younger, although I've got a comment about that. But let me let you go here. Let me let you cook, son. What's your sense of how old this roster is getting, and is that the right way to build this team around a young Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, it worked for Belichick, right? They won 6 Super Bowls when they did that in New England. I think it worked okay over there. And you know who was over there when they were doing that in New England? Adam Peters. So it worked okay. That situation. So I'm cool with it, not just because of that, but just because I have the ability to apply a little bit of common sense to the situation. And I'm going to encourage all our friends here. Let's put our common sense hats on. Let's think, okay? Would we have loved for Ron Rivera to have been, let's just say, below average in the draft? below average would be a giant leap from where he was, right? And we could have kept maybe half the guys that we drafted. Maybe half the guys. Maybe we're hovering right around that league average, which is about 50% get a second contract, right? That would have been great. But the bottom line is, from the end of the Bruce Allen era, from about 2019, right around the time we drafted, rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins and those guys, from that draft group up until last year's draft group was the first one to break this trend. We do not have more than two, I think. We have Sam Cosmi and we have Terry McLaurin. Correct me if there's a John Bates. That's three. Correct me if there's anybody else on the roster out of 5 years of drafting. So you've got to fill holes. You've got to put bodies out there. Unless some of you guys on Twitter who are saying the Commanders are too old are younger than these guys and can play football and would like to come play for the Commanders, like, you have to put guys out there. So you get NFL bodies, you get guys like Zach Ertz, who are reliable, veteran, high floor producers. No. At the ceiling, is this guy, prime Rob Gronkowski? He's not. But the bottom line is, you've got a situation where you've got to fill in gaps. You've got to get reliable starters to be competitive and to compete right off the bat. And that's what we've done successfully, to the tune of 12 wins and 2 playoff wins, and beating the number 1 seed by like 20 points last year. So it worked. There's no reason to believe it's not going to continue to work, especially when you look at the fact that, look at the young core we had this time last year. Terry McLaurin, Sam Cosmi. That's it. That was the end of the conversation. Now, Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Sam Cosmi. McLaurin's more of a vet at this point, but whatever. Daniels, McLaurin, Cosmi, Luvu, Samerstill. You're building this core. You're adding quality starters to this core. Even guys like Javonte Jean-Baptiste had flashes, showed moments. You're building this core up, and you have to build this core up kind of one step at a time. Quan Martin now becomes a part of what is a solid core for this team. And then you add vets, Marshawn Lattimore, Laramie Tunzel, Deebo Samuel. You add guys that are legit contributors, blue chip starters. You can't look at this team from a year ago and say it's not better. And I don't care if whatever average age, it's irrelevant, because you're not signing these guys to 12-year deals. You're signing them to 1 year. It doesn't hurt.
I think you're making a great point. I think it's a really good way to look at this, is that the fact that we don't have draft picks left from the Ron Rivera era. They've all been blown out, which is crushing. Right, and it's forcing AP into the strategy read. But what we do have is 9 draft picks from last season, 3 of which were starters and contributed greatly, right? And then you got year 2 guys like Ben Siddett, Luke McCaffrey, hopefully Jordan McGee, that were at the top end of that, through round 3 and round 5, I guess. Even a Dominique Hampton, who could be a contributor, right? So you still got those 9 guys on the roster. And yeah, you got draft picks in 1st, 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 7th. So you still got 5 picks, upcoming, and your 1st and 2nd pick, which I love. Because those 1st, 2nd picks could be guys that can really contribute, maybe even be starters for you, right? So I think you're right. I think they do have a young core and a young base there that they're bringing up, but they're just lacking the depth of that young group because they don't have 2, 3, 4 years of AP drafting. They have 2, 3, 4, 5 years of Ron Rivera drafting, which we all know how that's worked out. So I think they've been forced into this. And then by not locking in for multi-years on these guys that are kind of question marks, we could do the same thing. If a guy balls out, lock him up for a couple of years, extend them, right? Keep them in the building. Have confidence in your ability to keep in the building. Let's face it, the only guys that ended up walking were guys that I don't want to say we didn't want back, but we didn't want back at the price that they wanted. Because I think we could have retained those guys if we were willing to pay. So we've got the option on these guys to bet on our culture, bet on the way this team is constructed in the locker room, to say if we want to keep them, we get to keep them. But for now, let's get them on a 1-year prove-it deal. And, I think having listened to pro athletes like B. Mitch and other guys talk about it, nothing will motivate you more than being on a 1 year prove it deal, especially if
Nope.
you want to extend your career, right? We got a lot of those guys. So,
Yeah, and I mean, just think about this time last year, how we were talking about guys like Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner. I guess Wagner gets the benefit of the doubt as a first ballot Hall of Famer and with the resume he has. But past that, we were skeptical about Zach Ertz. We were skeptical about Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler comes in, second team All Pro kick returner. Even if that's all you got from him, and you got decent production as a third down running back outside of the injuries, but even if that's all you got from him, great signing. Zach Ertz comes in, was a key piece of what we were working with. So all in all, like it's gonna work. I think. I think there's no reason to believe otherwise. I like what they're doing, and I think would I prefer that you go out and you get a bunch of 22-year-old edge rushers for great market value that play with their hair on fire and fit the run perfectly? Of course, but the bottom line is you've got 31-year-old dudes playing on 1 year deals on all 32 teams across the NFL. You have 1 through 53. Some guys got to be number 48. Some guys got to be number 38, you know?
well,
It can't all be studs.
one thought that comes through my mind as we break down this roster, which we're going to get into next, you don't know. Like there are position groups that we've run it back at, right? Running back, I'll just give a little tease. Does one of these guys end up getting traded for us to pick up picks and maybe shuffle things around in the running back group? You never know, right?
No.
So, especially like a draft day type situation. So, um, you know, yes, it does look like for the most part we can go through a roster, give a depth chart, and we could field a pretty darn decent team. Um, so yeah, I say if you're good, son, I say we get into this roster breakdown now. After free agency, because I'm excited to kind of look into that and give our thoughts. Actually, talk
Yeah,
about some names down here.
I'm down to move on. I'm going to try and get through these names with relative speed. So I guess we'll just go position by position group here, talk about where we're running it back, what guys stayed, what guys went, etc. So right now, quarterback, of course, running back that whole room, Marcus Mariota re-signed. Brian Robinson Jr., running back room, everybody's coming back. Everybody re-signed, had a little bit of an anchorman moment there. But running back room, ran back the whole joint. Jeremy McNichols coming back, Chris Rodriguez Jr. coming back. Those are both guys that I think could end up practice squatters or on and off the practice squad as more talent gets added there.
They're gonna have to earn their spots on the roster still.
Yeah,
sure.
I think that's coming for sure. I think they like Chris Rodriguez as a practice squad and or backup guy, but I think you're going to draft somebody there. At wide receiver, you had some more action at wide receiver, which we knew there had to be because there were only 2 guys under contract at the end of last year. McLaurin obviously back, McCaffrey obviously back, and then KJ Osborne they brought back again. I think it's a practice squad body, bottom of the depth chart guy. Deebo Samuel comes back. Noah Brown comes back. I thought this one was interesting, but clearly that's their guy. It's not my guy. Out of the bodies that were available there, he's probably number 3 for me. I would have taken Zacchaeus. I would have probably taken Diami if he wasn't getting paid $10 million, and then Zacchaeus next. But they really like Noah Brown. He made some key plays over the course of the year. He had some solid games, so credit to him. And then obviously Mike Strachan and Chris Moore, 2 guys that we haven't heard of. Probably again bottom of the depth chart practice squad bodies there. But you've got wide receiver 1 through 4 sorted out with McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Noah Brown, and Luke McCaffrey. And I hate to break it to you guys, there is not a team in the NFL that has a stud wide receiver 5. Okay, that's just not how rosters work.
Well, and also I think that basically though, when you look at this wide receiver group, you could look at it and say, okay, well, we got our starting group back except for we replaced OZ with Deebo. And we talked about OZ's days might be limited because they kind of do the same thing. I think you feel pretty good about that, right? I mean, yes, we all talked about we liked what we saw out of Diami, especially late in the year, but he wasn't getting snaps when Noah was in there. Noah was the wide receiver 2, I think you could say. pretty safely with Ozzy in the slot. So, they like what he brings. They like his leadership, his good blocker, all those kind of good things. I think the only thing that I didn't like was he dropped the ball a little
That's
too
my
often.
concern with him. Yeah, and health.
But he was able to get open and he made some big plays. So you can't lose them all, I guess is my point. And so I'm feeling pretty good about that wide receiver core, all things considered. Maybe while we're in it, we'll kind of just do this half of the offense. We're running back, tight end. Sorry, I won't steal your thunder there, but re-sign Ertz, re-sign Bates. I like that. We talked about running back, tight end really made sense. The one that has me raising an eyebrow, before I go there, love the Mariota signing. You got Jaden Daniels. I mean, we should just take a moment to remind ourselves we've got Jaden Daniels, and we got an elite backup. We've got an elite backup for him, and that vibe is going. He's got his OC back. He's got his mentor, backup quarterback back, and Marcus Mariota. You got to love that. And if Marcus has to play, he's proven he can win games, which is awesome. The running back group has me raising an eyebrow. I feel like it's just an okay group and solid. Now, maybe their viewpoint on the reason the running back group wasn't able to perform as well as consistently as we would have liked was more to do with the offensive line than the actual running backs. But I'd like to see us mix it up at running back a little bit, and maybe the opportunity will still come in the draft to add a dynamic player in that position group.
It's supposedly one of the best. There's supposedly a generational running back draft.
That's why I think a trade may not be out of the question here.
Like trading Brian Robinson or something like that?
Yeah.
I'd be all over that. I think it'd be sick. Yeah. I don't know what the value you get for a guy like that is. I think, and this is maybe a topic for later. I don't want to debate it right now, but I'm just going to plant a little seed. I think highest odds for a draft night disappointment is that they don't draft a running back. I think that is your highest odds for a draft night disappointment with this unit, because Robinson, you can look at the I don't feel this way. Let me be clear. But you can look at the numbers last year and you can say, hey, when everybody was healthy, Robinson was cooking. When the line was healthy, when Robinson was healthy, he was cooking.
He had some really good games.
He had a few good games. We're on here talking about he's a solid running back. He's like a David Montgomery type, right? I don't think the talent is there with Robinson to get into that upper echelon. And I think when you look at what they did across the league with Henry and with Saquon, you saw what a dynamic running back pairing that with a dynamic quarterback can do. That being said, I can see them kind of saying there's bigger need at edge, there's bigger need at corner. But so just put a pin in that, Commanders friends. I think that is highest odds for a real draft day disappointment, and I would be as disappointed as anybody else. But I'm just reading the tea leaves here.
I agree with you, though. I think the tea leaves indicate to me they like that running back group, and they're willing to run it back with them. Maybe it's another, obviously we'll get into who we think we should draft, but
yeah. Then so tight end room all staying the same. John Bates obviously gets that multiple year deal. He's a stud. He's a tackle that you get to play at tight ends. Basically, he's the best blocking tight end in the NFL. That has real use here, no matter what any PFF junkie will tell you. That has extreme use here and on any football team. John Bates is a guy that's going to play for a decade plus in the NFL.
Well, yeah, let me pause for a minute there because you hit a little nerve on the thing. You've got to have nuance to how you evaluate signings in a team. A good example, you don't compare John Bates to, I don't know,
Mark Andrews.
Who's a top tier tight end.
They're not the same player.
Right? He's not a catching tight end. He's not a pass receiver. He can do it. He can catch the ball. He finds little nooks and crannies every once in a while. Seems to have pretty good hands, but that's not why you have him. You can't compare Deebo Samuel to Justin Jefferson. They're not the same kind of player. Deebo Samuel is a hybrid. He's going to get touches out of the backfield. Your idea is to get him in space and let him get yak. So you can't just purely go off wide receiver grades or purely go off tight end grades to grade how these guys fit in this offense and the contributions they can make to this team.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm done.
I 100% agree. These guys come back when you get further down the depth chart. These utility guys, which I think John Bates is one of them, they come back for specific reasons to run specific roles and are brought back and are paid at the level they're paid at because they do a good job of it.
Yeah.
Bottom line, 32 teams in the NFL come the start of the new league year are trying to get better. Nobody makes these moves because they think they're bad or they're trying to get worse. Speaking of good moves, Laramie Tunzel, left tackle, huge upgrade. Brandon Coleman, Trent Scott. Trent Scott comes back. He gives you a lot of flex as a depth piece. I love it. Nick Allegretti, Nate Herbig, Chris Paul. Herbig's obviously a new signing. Chris Paul still hanging around there. Good for him. Then you got Biadish, Dieter. I don't love bringing Dieter back. They clearly see something in him that they like. I'm hoping Herbig knows how to snap the ball and can be a backup center if you need him. Past that, you got Cosme and you got Julian Good-Jones, and then you got Wiley. We're in decent shape on the offensive line. I think bringing in Tunzel immediately brings you into the top 10 conversation on the offensive line because of the position flex. It allows you, early reports are that Coleman's going to kick out to right tackle, probably have Wiley play right guard while Cosme's getting better, and then I think you probably move Wiley into left guard, put Allegretti on the bench, and then bring Cosme in. Or you have a competition between Wiley and Allegretti at that left guard spot.
Gives you options. Yeah, we've heard left guard for Brandon Coleman as well, and maybe they're still going to. Maybe they haven't really locked in on that yet.
Yeah,
maybe they're going to mix and match a little bit in camp and figure out where guys look the best. Right?
You don't know. And again, for the naysayers out there, I don't think there's an offensive line across the NFL, including Philly now because you guys lost Mekhi Becton, by the way. I don't think there's an offensive line across the NFL that has 5 absolute dog studs across the board at every single position, 99 overall Madden guys. It just doesn't exist. So Brandon Coleman being potentially your weakest spot at right tackle, which I don't even feel would that be the case. I think Allegretti is the guy, but
when Cosme comes back, you got 3 out of 5 that you would say you could probably put the outstanding word on.
Yeah.
And then Brandon Coleman as a right tackle or a guard is compared to being our left tackle. He's knocking on the door of potentially being Sam Cosby 2.0. So I think this line is – I've gone from feeling like average to maybe slightly above average with coaching to this could be a top 10 line in the league.
Yeah, I think
with some outstanding players.
I had him somewhere in that between average and below average space last year. And I think we're talking about, I think if everybody's healthy, if Cosme comes back and can perform at the level he can perform at, I think this is a top 5 unit.
And I like the flexibility. I like the fact that you got guys who can play tackle or guard. Trent Scott, say what you will. I'm kind of glad he's back, especially after having lost Big Luke. I think that I'm happy he's back because I do think he was serviceable.
Yeah,
he plays hard. So
he's a decent player, man. When you talk about, like I said, somebody's got to be number 38 on that roster, right? Trent Scott's great in that position.
You can't take that target away from Jaden Daniels.
No,
he's a touchdown catcher
is unbelievable. The touchdown production, you could not afford to lose that. Especially with the red zone woes this offense had at points in time last year. You got to have that available. Anyways, getting on to the defense here, this is where there was a bit more turnover, probably more exciting turnover. Obviously, Fowler's gone, and that means you bring in Dietrich Wise Jr. from the Patriots, really solid run defender. Farrell gets re-signed. Farrell's a nothing burger to me, but it's fine. Jacob Martin comes in from the Bears. And then you've got Eddie Goldman as well coming in from the Bears. I think he's an interesting piece. Javon Kinlaw is the biggest name signing on the defense, probably because it was the first one. If you, again, possess basic reading comprehension skills. You should know that that contract is not nearly as big and flashy as his agent tweeted it out to make it look. I think he's hitting for
I've
like
heard that
seven.
as well.
He's hitting for like 7.5 this year and then 16 next year. That's nothing for a defensive tackle. Milton Williams has an AAV of like 26 a year. So let's use our brains here, people. I know we're capable of it. We can do it. And the plan there is very clear. Kinlaw is going to play some kind of 3 technique end / hybrid rotation at defensive tackle, and you're going to see Payne and Johnny Newton, who they highly favor. They are super high on Johnny Newton. They are high enough on Johnny Newton that they were cool to let John Allen walk and cool to pivot to Kinlaw, who's more of a edge tackle hybrid. You're going to see those guys be your main 2 tackles, and I think Johnny Newton has an opportunity to take a really big step next year. And I know it's not a guy that got re-signed, but when you're talking about these year 2 guys really acclimating to the league, I think that's a guy that can have more impact than any of the guys that we signed on the defensive side of the ball. You got anything to comment on that defensive line group? We want to keep it running.
I mean, you got Dorrance Armstrong back, who's kind of penciled in as your right defensive end starter, who solid pro. I think that's what you say about Dorrance, right? I mean, he gives you some really good snaps, solid pro. It'll be a rotation situation on that line. I mean, that's going to be, and I think drafting an edge with that first pick is a very real possibility. It's a deep edge draft, so a starter might not be on this roster quite yet, or at least a starting rotational guy. Yeah, Kinlaw is interesting. He's intriguing. That's the word I'd use for Kinlaw, right? You watch the highlight reels of these guys when we pick them, right? So you're seeing their best plays, but the burst and the way that he's able to attack when he gets off the ball, it's pretty exciting. It seems like he could be a disruptor. And they're going to pick their spots with him. I think, Deron Payne and Johnny Newton, I think, are going to be your stalwarts at that role. I like the fact they brought Sheldon Day back. He started getting, replacing guys and getting some minutes in there. You lose John Allen, who obviously a really good organization in Minnesota locked him in. Really great player. And like I said,
for him.
Even John Kahn talked about it. Would you say John Kinlaw is better than John Allen? I don't think anybody's going to say that.
No.
Anybody's going to say that. But what could he possibly be a better fit? And what he brings skill set wise, it's different from Johnny Newton and Deron Payne. I said this earlier. I'm repeating myself, but possibly. And so you can't keep them all. And we kind of knew John Allen was gone. We were the first. Kind of, I don't want to say we were the first. I'll say you heard it here first. It's hyperbole. We knew Dante Fowler probably wasn't going to come back because Dante Fowler was a specialist. He was good at one thing. He's pretty good at one thing, but he was good at one thing. He wasn't what they wanted in a full package defensive end. And we called it. He wasn't going to be back. So no shock there. He only got a 1-year deal to go back to Dallas.
Fowler
and hat tip to Dante, had a much better year than any of us would have expected him to have.
Well, look, there's a couple Dante Fowler talking points, and this is going to contrast Pop's hat tip. But I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna be fair.
Being nice. I'm being nice.
I'm gonna be fair here. Respect to the individual. I'm sure he's a great guy. He contributed last year. Most of those 10.5 sacks came in 2 games. He had some splash productions. He also went into witness protection program during the playoffs. Watch him completely blow his run fit and spin inside on a wide receiver against Saquon Barkley in the first play of the NFC Championship game. That should be enough to tell you he can't come back. And he was a decent pass rusher. Decent. He's not Micah Parsons. He's a decent pass rusher. And he's the kind of guy that will make you pay for leaving him on an island sometimes.
Replaceable. He's replaceable.
Replaceable pass rusher and an absolute liability bordering on your better putting 10 guys out there on run defense. Liability. He tripped Bobby Wagner on that play. Watch that play back. He tripped Bobby Wagner on it. And it was not just that play. He's a liability.
It's an example. Yeah.
So that was the thing this defense struggled the most at. He actively hurt this defense at that. So, again, with all due respect to the young man, I think I'm more willing to take a look at Javon Kinlaw. And to just put a button on that, I don't think you're betting on Javon Kinlaw being better than John Allen today. I think you're betting on getting more contribution from Javon Kinlaw 8 weeks into the season than you would get for John Allen in this system. I think you're betting on finding a home for Kinlaw and developing him into what you specifically need more than you would have been able to change with John Allen.
You were never going to, with the construction on the roster, you were never going to pay John Allen what he got paid by Minnesota to bring him back.
Kinlaw, for me, is this year's Jeremy Chin. He's a guy who lacked coaching and needed a little bit of time to kind of figure out what's going on with him in the NFL. Had flash moments. Obviously, the physical talent is there, and the job is now on this staff to find out how do we maximize that. And it worked well with Jeremy Chin last year, so let's see if it can work well with him this year. Moving on. We spent a lot of time on this. I think we can breeze through some of this next stuff. Bobby Wagner, obviously, had to bring him back. Jordan McGee coming back. Dom Hampton, Nick Bellore. Great bringing Nick Bellore back, but you're not going to see him play defense. You're going to see him only play specials. He's a stud on specials, so really happy to have him back. Frankie Louvu. I think the plan at pass rusher is that McGee is going to play more inside linebacker with Bobby Wagner as the season goes on, and you're going to see Frankie Louvu go headhunt on third down. I think that's going to be the plan, which I love because I think that's what he's best at. I think Frankie Louvu is a stud, but he's clearly best at rushing the passer. He's really, really darn good at rushing the passer.
You got Dominic Hampton there too in year 2. Maybe he steps up as well.
He's that weird, like you play a safety at linebacker for a couple plays. He's in that tweener situation. So we'll see what you can get out of him. At cornerback or defensive back, let's group corners and safeties together. You added Jonathan Jones from the Patriots and Will Harris from the Saints. Will Harris projects to just be Jeremy Chin with better coverage. So 2 thumbs up there because Chin lacked ball skills and it was kind of a liability in coverage from time to time. So if Harris can be an improvement there, even if he's not all the thunder that Chin was, which I think he is from what you've seen from him, I think net improvement. Jonathan Jones, solid starter, solid, reliable. He's almost like Zach Ertz at cornerback. Solid, reliable vet starter at this point. Obviously, he's not Marshawn Lattimore, but good news is we have Marshawn Lattimore as well. So I think he'll be a good depth piece there. Otherwise, pretty much running back the same room, aside from Kevon Seymour, who I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard of until I read this chart. And Noah Igbenogany is coming back as well, which is exciting because I actually thought he played pretty decent last year. And I think if he's your cornerback 4 or if he's your slot guy, I think you're really happy with that. But it seems like the plan is going to be Lat and Samerstill on the outside and then some kind of combination of Jonathan Jones and Noah Igbenogany on the inside.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at cornerback or the secondary in general, right, I mean, you swap out Will Harris for Jeremy Chin. Let's call that a tie. You still got Marshawn Lattimore, hopefully a healthy Marshawn Lattimore. You got year 2 out of Mikey Sandestro.
Yeah.
No, I think he passed other guys on the depth chart. He was our 3rd corner, last year. So you're kind of running it back, and you hope that a Jonathan Jones and Will Harris can contribute. So feel pretty good about that secondary. I mean, I wouldn't hate drafting someone in the secondary that can come in and contribute. If they best player available was a corner, I wouldn't hate it.
No.
I wouldn't hate it, but yeah. So I don't know, like kickers. I'm going to just fast forward through kickers, right? We already said we hope competition comes in for Gonzalez. Love having Tressway back, but when we look at targeting and we going quick here, when we look at targeting guys for the draft. What would you say are your top 2 positions in need at this point, now that the roster is filled out? Who do you want 1 and 2, rapid fire, position?
I think if there's an absolute stud, dynamic pass rusher available at 29, you take him. Otherwise, I'd probably trade back. And then I'd be interested in running back. I'd be interested in pass rusher. And I would be interested in that's pretty much it. Running back and more pass rush help. And like you said, if there's a Mike Samerstill this year in those middle rounds that you think can immediately come in and contribute and be a dog in your secondary, obviously go grab him. That would be great. Or maybe if there's a really stud starting safety, because Will Harris does have that ability to play corner and nickel as well. So if there's a stud strong safety you can get, I'd be down for that too.
Yeah, I think I'm still about edge and running back. I still think
we're
picked on Brian Robinson a little bit. Maybe even an Eckler could be. Maybe it's a late round pick or something. Like if you get a really dynamic guy and a team has a need. I mean, Austin Eckler really flashed. He's a weapon when he can be on the field and be healthy. I'd like to have him around, but I think if you got an opportunity to really get value at running back, I wouldn't hate that. But I mean, we could use another receiver. We could use another, I don't know, line. Maybe, I wouldn't hate getting another young lineman. Certainly, defensive line, if you went 2 picks at defensive line, I wouldn't hate that. And we talked about secondary, even linebacker, right? So, I mean, it's pretty much every position group. Again, AP has put himself in the position of focusing on best player available.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah, that's the last, like the 4 honorable mention would be if there's a guy at tackle that you had like a top 10 grade on that is there at 29, take him, play him at right tackle and then move Coleman inside.
Why not?
Like if you have that ability, you see it across the NFL now. It's just about getting 5 dogs out there. Mekhi Becton for Philly played fantastic last year. This guy started as a tackle and is now a premier guard in the NFL. So you can move these guys around, man. So that would be it for me, just adding depth in those places. But yeah, I think we're pretty much done, Pop. This was
Good
a hearty
stuff. I got a special guest here. Come here.
Oh, my little bro.
There he is.
Melito joins the pod. Commander Mello.
He's got Austin Eckler like speed and wiggle.
That's awesome with Bobby Wagner like build. Yeah. This little man, what a stud. That's awesome. And my guy is peacefully asleep, so I'm not going to him at the moment. But
let it go. Let Rigo rest.
Yeah, Rigo needs his beauty rest. But anyways, man, I think that's all for us. We covered everything. I think this is the first DC podcast. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the first DC podcast to go over the depth chart at this point in the year. So, guys, you know what to do. Drop the boys a little bit of love.
Draft picks.
Drop the boys a little bit of love for sure. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Hit us up on Twitter at Dom and Pop. And yeah, without further ado, I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
Thank you for another great week, everybody, and hail to the Commanders.
Hail.